Yeah. Look, this lawyer about to talk about some stuff with the whole everything going on with Trump. I'm nervous about some things, but not about everything. But one thing I am very interested in is the police. What does it mean? Police, like, what can they do? What can they can't do? Here's a situation where they covering the cams on your porch, man. Like, now, in my right mind, I don't think there's nothing you could be doing that could justify. Why are you covering the cam? What are you doing that you don't want to be seen doing? This is criminal. If a person who wasn't a cop or did not have cop clothes on or uniform was on your porch fidgeting with your cameras, would you predict they had good intentions for you?
Notices a doorbell camera or a porch security cam. But instead of acting professionally, the police officer chooses to cover up the camera, or even worse, disable the camera, hiding what he's planning to do next. Sound extreme? Unfortunately, it's not. This is happening all over the country, with some police departments admitting to it being routine practice. In this video, I'm breaking down number 1, is it legal for police to tamper with your security cameras? Number 2, the specific steps you can take to protect your privacy and your security. And then number 3, how to handle a police officer if he refuses to leave your front door. Protecting your home starts with knowing your rights, so let's dive in. So can cops actually cover up your security cameras or disable them altogether? In order to answer this question, we need to understand the special relationship that your front and back porch area of your home has under the 4th Amendment. When cops approach your front or your back door, this is an area that has been identified by the U.S. Supreme Court as being curtilage, which is the area immediately surrounding the inside of your home. Under the 4th Amendment, this area of your home, known as the curtilage, has the same amount of protection under the 4th Amendment as the inside of your home does, which means police officers have much less flexibility when it comes to search and seizures in the curtilage immediately surrounding the inside of your home. Now, I looked for a specific case involving police officers coming up to a front door and manipulating or destroying a security camera. But I couldn't find anything specific, but I can tell you this. If the police officer is walking up to your front door and performing what's known as a knock and talk, he cannot exceed what is known as social norms. Now, what exactly is a knock and talk? A knock and talk is a police investigative technique where a police officer walks up to your front door, knocks on the door, and wants to have a conversation with you, which the real reason he's looking to do this is to use that as a basis to potentially search the inside of your home or use it as
Police don't come around just to say, hey, hello. They come around to lock people up, in my opinion.
probable cause for an arrest. Police are taught to use this tactic of a knock and talk when they believe there might be some criminal activity going on, but they don't yet have enough probable cause to go get a search warrant. Now, if cops are coming to your front door only as a knock and talk, and they don't have probable cause, the Supreme Court has ruled that police have nothing more than what's known as a license to approach. Now, I've already mentioned that your front porch and your front door is considered curtilage under the 4th Amendment. As a result of that, that area, as the officer approaches your front door, is just as protected as the inside of your home. So as a result, if an officer is legally allowed to come to your front door and knock on the front door, he must be in compliance with what the court calls socially acceptable behavior, just as anyone else, just as a delivery driver or anyone else might do when they come to your front door. So that being said, let's apply that for a second. Think about a guy that's coming to your front door trying to sell you something. Do you think it would be socially acceptable behavior for that guy to walk over there and cover your security camera, or start grabbing for your porch cam and trying to move it away, or maybe disable it, throw it down into the bushes? Absolutely not. That would not be considered socially acceptable behavior. The Supreme Court gave us this social norm standard in the case known as Florida versus Jardines. In that case, the court said, and I quote, "The knocker on the front door is treated as an invitation or license to attempt an entry, justifying ingress to the home by solicitors, hawkers, and peddlers of all kinds." The court then went on to say, and I quote, Thus, a police officer not armed with a warrant may approach a home and knock, precisely because that is no more than any private citizen might do. Now let's combine that ruling in Florida versus Jardines with another ruling known as United States versus Jacobson. In that case, the court ruled that a seizure of property occurs under the Fourth Amendment when police intentionally interfere with an individual's possessory interests in their property. In other words, if police mess with people's stuff or manipulate it in any way, in such a way that the owner didn't want it, that could definitely be a search under the Fourth Amendment. Now, how does that apply to cops moving a security camera or covering it up
That's interesting.
during a knock and talk? Applying the court standard here, even though there's not a case directly on point, if you apply that standard, if a police officer walks up and manipulates a camera, covers it up, or takes it down completely, that is exactly the definition of manipulating something that it talks about in United States versus Jacobson. Therefore, we could have a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. You say, Jeff, but what if it's not a seizure? Well, couldn't it just be a good old-fashioned criminal trespass? Imagine if I was a politician and I showed up at your front door and I happened to know that you had a camera there and I was trying to get out there and solicit votes. But in the process of doing so, I decided I was going to cover up your camera or I was going to disable it and maybe move it away. If you called the cops and the cops came out, what do you think they would do? At a minimum, I guarantee you they would trespass me from your property, prohibiting me from coming back ever again. This is exactly what cops are doing when they show up at someone's house and they start manipulating their cameras. Cops need to be exposed for this behavior. But wait a minute, Jeff, what if the officer actually grabs the Ring camera? Because I've seen several footage of this where an officer actually grabs the camera, whether it's a Ring camera or an actual just porch camera that's up on the above the door. What if they grab it and they tear it down and they disable it and throw it in the bushes? Is that legal? Absolutely not. Here, it clearly affects your possessory interests in your property. That makes it a Fourth Amendment violation. I would argue not only that, it's a criminal trespass, and at a minimum, if they damage the camera, it's criminal mischief, which could be an arrestable offense. Now, if this happens and the officer walks up and he's covering your camera or he's destroying that camera, the first thing I'm going to encourage you to not do is do not open your front door. Unless the officer has a valid warrant or some actual exigent circumstances he can prove, you can remain in your house with the door closed and be protected behind the door of your castle, and the cops cannot do anything about it. Secondly, call a lawyer to find the very best way to report this violation in your state, whether it be reporting it to the Attorney General, whether it be an actual criminal trespass argument, or maybe actually even a federal civil lawsuit. I'm not saying you have to necessarily hire a lawyer, but I want to encourage you to get some legal advice, because I've seen people do this. They think an officer has violated their rights at their front door. Guess where they go? They go down to the same police department where that same officer was just a few minutes ago, and when they go down there, guess what happens? They start to make a report on a police officer that they claim they have camera footage on, only to find out what? That same cop ends up being one who shows up confronting those folks. And that's the whole point here. You have to make sure you're prepared to report the crime properly and report the civil rights violation. But wait, what if you see the cop messing with your camera and you decide you're going to confront the officer, so you open your front door and you demand the officer to leave? First, if you choose to do this, make sure you stay inside your home and do not give police access to the inside of your home. If you have a screen door, make sure and keep that screen door locked, never open it, and make sure you stay inside the protection of your home. I always tell clients, as a general rule, you stay inside and you make sure the cops stay outside. Now remember, the police have no more rights during a knock and talk than a Girl Scout does trying to sell you cookies or your UPS driver delivering your packages. So, because they only have a general license to approach your front door, remember you can always revoke that license. Now what if the cops still refuse to leave after you demand they leave? Here's where things get interesting, because under French versus Merrill, if the cops continue to stay at your front door and they refuse to leave, you could have a valid civil rights claim that you could bring against the police officers individually. Now I'm going to break down French versus Merrill a little bit more here in a second, but one of the requirements of this is the officer must know clearly that you have no desire to talk to him and that you have requested that he leave. But what if the cops claim they already have probable cause and you have no other choice but to talk to them? Now I want you to recognize this is a trick. Because think about it for a second. If the cops already had probable cause to speak to you,
In your house.
they would be here with a warrant right now. They wouldn't be asking you anything. They would be forcing down your door and taking and doing whatever they want. As a general rule, if the officer is at your front door and he doesn't have a warrant, you can demand that he leaves right now and come back with a warrant. But wait, if you really think the officer is criminally trespassing and he's refusing to leave, can't you just make a citizen's arrest? This is where I get this question very frequently from people saying, I'm going to make a citizen's arrest and take matters into my own hands. I want to warn you here, please reconsider. Every court I've ever seen holds that someone, a citizen, attempting to arrest an on-duty armed police officer, they have ruled that it is against public policy for this to happen. Now, cops know this. So how do you think they're going to treat you if you try to make a citizen's arrest? You'll end up in the hospital or worse. The only exception to this is, if the cop tries to use unjustifiable deadly force, you always have a right to defend yourself. Now, what if instead cops show up at your front door in the middle of the night, banging violently on your door, demanding that you open it immediately? Is this a regular knock and talk? Absolutely not. This is something completely different. If cops show up at your front door, pounding on the front door, demanding that you open it immediately, and it looks like they're refusing to leave, courts have ruled that in that situation, this is no longer a knock and talk, because a reasonable person under the same circumstances would believe they are not free to leave and they had no other choice but to open the door. Under that scenario, you are actually detained even before you open the door. Cops have now detained you under that situation. So if you open that door and confront them, this is not a situation where you can demand that they leave. At this moment, it is critical to exercise your rights. You got to stop right then and tell the officers, "Officer, I exercise my right to remain silent. I will not answer any questions without my attorney present, and I refuse all searches of my place or my person." It's really important to know the difference here, because I want you to understand, you don't even have to answer the front door here, but if this sort of situation happens where they're not leaving and you end up feeling that they're being aggressive and you do answer the door, you have to be ready to exercise your rights. Now here's a twist to think about. What if cops continue to be aggressive? They come to your front door, they bang on the door, you refuse to answer the door, but then they leave and they just keep coming back over and over again. This is exactly what happened in the case I mentioned earlier, French versus Merrill. Cops showed up over at French's house doing a knock and talk looking for a cell phone from his ex-girlfriend. Now mind you, this was late at night. By itself, the court said this was not illegal. Number one, they kept focusing on the fact that the porch lights were still on. The cops had specific knowledge that French had just been over at the ex-girlfriend's house a short time earlier. But the real problem here was not that the cops came to the front door and were beating on the door. The problem is they kept coming back over and over again. In fact, the court specifically said in the actual facts that when the officers would come to the front door, they could see French peeping through the actual blinds. And so they knew that French saw them, and obviously they saw French, and French still refused to answer the front door. When police know that you don't want to talk and they still refuse to leave, they are now violating your Fourth Amendment rights, because this is no longer a knock and talk, this is a Fourth Amendment violation. And the only way they can get around this is if they are able to prove exigent circumstances. Maybe they could claim that there was some type of destruction of evidence going on or some emergency happening. Cops are prohibited from lingering around on your curtilage, especially in this situation. The court came down really hard on the police because they said in this situation the police were very aware that French had no desire whatsoever to speak to them, yet they continued on persistently with their harassment of him at the front door. And as a result of that, the court not only found that this was a Fourth Amendment violation, but they came down very hard and did something you very rarely see in courts. They found there was no qualified immunity for those police officers for the Fourth Amendment violation. The court specifically said that a reasonable police officer should and would know, under those circumstances, that the individual in the home had no desire to speak and they must leave unless they have a valid warrant. So remember, if a police officer comes to your house performing a knock and talk, demanding that you come outside and banging on your front door, first of all, they cannot actually continue to just beat at your front door and try to threaten that you come outside. They cannot just do that indefinitely. In fact, the only way they can act upon it is if they have some type of exigent circumstances. And I'm going to identify a few of those examples here in a second. But otherwise, I want you to understand, you can ignore them at your front door altogether. So what are some examples? One example would be, let's say it's a nuisance call because of loud music happening at a party. In that situation, many courts have ruled that an officer can actually claim that there are exigent circumstances because of the nuisance call. Another example would be a car blocking another car at a location that prohibits that car from leaving. There's been case law that has said in that situation, that creates exigent circumstances where the officer can actually continue to knock and compel some type of interaction with the homeowner, that's someone who lives within the home. Another example would be reason to believe that there has been a crime committed within the home and that there might be a weapon or some type of evidence that could be destroyed if the officer doesn't take quick action. Otherwise, unless the officers have some type of exception, some type of exigent circumstance here that is concrete, they're not going to be able to do this, particularly if they try to do this late at night. Think about it. When is it ever reasonable for a salesman to come by your house at 2 a.m. knocking on your front door? Without exigent circumstances, that doesn't meet social norms, not only for the cops, but for any other person who comes to your front door. So if cops come to your front door, the lights are out, there's no sound coming from your house, and they keep banging on your door early in the morning hours, I want you to understand there's a very good possibility that is a violation of your constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, and there can be some potential action that could come forward, just like happened in French versus Merrill. Finally, what if cops get frustrated that you won't answer the front door? So instead of continuing to bang on the front door, they decide they're going to snoop around the sides of your house. Maybe they're going to take a look inside your car and peer inside your car and check everything else they can within the immediate area surrounding your home. Are they legally allowed to do this? Now, the critical question to determine if cops can do this is going to depend on why they are actually there. Let's take one example. Let's say police officers are coming to your front door to perform a knock and talk, and as they walk by your car parked in the driveway, they happen to look down and they see something sitting in plain view in the front seat of your car. In that situation, they happen to see something in plain view as they were on their way for a knock and talk. The Supreme Court ruled that police officers do have a license to walk up to your front door and use the normal means of any other public to get to your front door. So the general rule is, if they have a right to be there, they have a right to look. So if they're on their way up to your front door and they happen to see something in plain view, either sitting in the front seat of your car or sitting in your yard or otherwise, or maybe even on your front porch, they can absolutely use that against you. But if they are only on your property to snoop around your curtilage, in other words, instead of coming to your front door and knocking, they immediately just walk in and start looking around the side of your house. They start digging in things. If that's what they're doing, this is your curtilage, remember? So the area immediately surrounding the outside of your home there, that is as protected as the inside of your home. Just like cops can't walk through your front door and just start looking at the inside of your house, they are not allowed to snoop around the curtilage of your home either. If you wouldn't be comfortable with your UPS driver doing it or a Girl Scout doing it, then the cops shouldn't be doing it either. Here, the cops, if they're snooping around your curtilage, have converted an exception to the warrant requirement known as a knock and talk. They've now converted that into a full-blown search. The final thing to consider is what time of day did the police actually perform this knock and talk. So if they came to your front door and they did it late at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they just came to your front door and barely knocked on it and then started snooping around, is that something that would meet the social norms of a salesman? What if you got somebody coming to your front door trying to sell something at 10 o'clock at night? That would not be a normal thing for them to do. So once again, the cops must be... license they have under the law would meet
the social norms of any other person who would be allowed to come to your front door. So if cops ever show up at your house and they're snooping around and they've never knocked on your front door, you need to understand that is a violation of your constitutional rights and it's absolutely illegal. We now know what cops can and cannot legally do when they come knocking at your front door. But what if they try to force their way into your house? Check out this next video where I break down what you can do to protect yourself if cops try to force open your door. See you over there.
All right, we're going to definitely do a part 2. We're going to leave this, how to stop cops from covering your porch. I like that, because police come around, man, and they want to lock people up. So the Trump regimen got me. I need to know the laws, man. I need to retouch base on the laws. It's been a minute since I was on point with them when I was in college. I had to be on point with them because the police would always find me, because I went to a school with majority white people. So the police will always end up finding a way to have to count me out of being part of the problem. Yeah. Like, share, and subscribe. Put your area code down below. I'll holler at y'all on the next one. Hit the like button.